out of the passing parade of our time, we take now not the story of a human being, but of a mass of gigantic living machinery, over which lay the curse of one of the darkest mysteries of the war. Her name we all remember. Normandy. And this is the story of her life and death. In 1935, we forgot the Depression, and all New York turned out to meet her for the first time. It was the coming out party of a mechanical princess, and you'd have thought she was a world-famed hero instead of a machine. She had crossed the peaceful ocean in 4 days, 3 hours, and 2 minutes. She was the fastest thing that ever floated on water. While radio networks broadcast her arrival over the nation, everything in the North River that could hoot or toot or whistle went into action. Tony Sarg's overgrown Mickey Mouse floated along in the wind. The fireboats tried to turn the harbor into one great fountain for her. And they actually draped her American pier with flowers and streamers of silk. France Afloat, she was called. The France that in our minds stood for crystal flagons of perfume and $200 dresses and dry champagne. The France that would never have to grow serious again. She was longer than the Empire State Building, more than 1,000 feet. She had 11 decks and 22 elevators. She carried 2,000 passengers and 1,300 servants to wait on them. Hollywood never called for a movie set as enormous and impressive as her lounge. In the main dining salon, 700 persons could feast at one time. The latest movies were shown every night in her theater. You could swim inside in the indoor pool. If you liked art, the greatest painters had done the murals that glittered everywhere. And you could kneel to pray in the magnificent chapel. In the vast shining kitchens, 189 chefs prepared your meals. The stoves were 56 feet long. More than 500,000 pounds of food were stored in the refrigerators. 21,000 bottles of champagne and 30-year-old bourbon and 18-year-old scotch and 60-year-old brandy were stored in her wine cellars. 4,000 pounds of fresh caviar were carried on every voyage. And it was the boast of the chefs that no dish ever invented anywhere on the earth could not be prepared and served to you if you desired it. Even the dogs were provided with a menu. Grilled French lamb chops, chicken liver patties, food for dogs that one day the human beings of Europe would dream about as they themselves faced starvation. This was the Normandy. Hundreds lounging sleepily on the sun deck, the swimming pools of crystal water, ping pong if you were full of pep, wireless telephones to any office on the globe, and special decks of toys and games just for your children. Little French children, many of them, now orphans who do no more dancing in the sun. And finally, and at night, the lovers standing close together by the rail, and the wind blowing in their hair, and the old romantic words spoken out to the sea. But the ship they sailed upon was not fast enough to race ahead of fate. The party was over. Out from the steel shell came the silver and the gold, the crystal and the polished woods. The lady was now prepared to work for her living. So the Normandie was forgotten because Americans now faced the tragic business of war. And yet one night they looked up and saw a stunning sight.
The one-time luxury liner Normandie afire at her midtown Manhattan pier. As the three top decks go up in smoke, 200 of the 1,500 workmen, converting her into the Navy Auxiliary Lafayette, are trapped aboard. Fire engines and fireboats battle to bring the blaze under control. Tons of water poured into the smoking inferno, threatened to unbalance the mighty vessel. The blaze rages, and a 20-degree list snaps the mooring horses. Those 5 tugs pushing against the huge hull are hard put to keep her from capsizing. Damage, about $5 million. But the Navy says the ex-Queen of the Atlantic will again sail the seas.
Like the nation that gave her birth, the Normandie was gone. She was lost in the darkness of bitter ill luck and tragic error. Yet in the wreckage of the nation, men began to stir. And with a kind of desperate power, the impossible began to become reality. And as Frenchmen staggered toward Africa to form new armies, the wreckage that was the Normandie, too, slowly began the return to life. The scenes that follow in a few seconds actually cover weeks and months of ceaseless toil. And although the Navy was careful not to tell it to the world, it was in this virtually impossible feat of engineering that we learned the mysteries and trained the men who saved the ruined fleet at Pearl Harbor, and thus performed one of the mechanical miracles of the Second World War. And this is the last view our cameras were allowed to take of her, as the one-time princess, now gray with battle paint, sailed past the Statue of Liberty and into the secrecy of war. Now she's a tool in the Navy, which will cleanse the Atlantic of submarines, sweep the hidden mines away, free the ocean of its deadly fear, and make it once again a place where white and shining palaces can sail in peace. And that is the story of a ship, her life, her death, and her resurrection in the passing parade.